Hi everyone, my name's Jordan and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my December wrap-up. This is New Year's Eve. I do not think I will be finishing another book today, so I am going ahead and filming this. Now I know you may be wondering, where are all of my end of year videos? I decided I wanted to wait to do all of my end of year videos until the very end of December, beginning of January, because you never know what is going to become a new favorite. So I was still reading books. I'm still reading a book today. I just know I won't finish it today, but I've been reading books up until the end of the year, so I didn't want to put out a top 10 list or whatever and then it change. So I promise those are coming. They will be coming towards the beginning of January. There's going to be a few of them. Towards the middle of the year, I did a tier ranking list of all the books I had read so far up to that point in June or July, and so I'm going to finish that out with the rest of the books I read this year, and so I'm going to have an entire tier ranking list of every book I read this year. And then I'm going to do my top 10 list. I might do a most disappointing reads, I'm not sure. I'm not totally sure what all the plans are yet, but those are coming, I promise. You will get to see my year-end videos. So with that, let's do this wrap-up. I actually had an incredibly good reading month in December. I read a ton. At work, I was kind of slow, which meant I didn't have to pause my audiobooks as much. So I knocked out a lot of audiobooks. Plus, I just read a lot of physical books. I was traveling for some of the month, but it was more of like a relaxing vacation with family, so I was able to read a lot while I was there. And overall, I've just been reading a lot. It's cold outside, there's not much to do, so I've just been reading nonstop. I just realized that my AC was going for the whole beginning of the video, but I don't really want to refilm it. So I apologize if it's loud, I'll try to edit some of it out. But anyway, continuing on. The first book I read was Avadons Gate by James S.A. Corey. This is the third book in the Expanse series, and this book is the one that really got me invested in The Expanse. The first two books, the first one I liked, didn't love. Second one I liked more than the first, but still didn't love. But this third one has got me hyped for The Expanse. And I'll talk about the fourth one later because I also read that this month. But this third one was really good. I don't want to get into what it's about because I don't want to spoil anything, but basically the first book is about a crew of people who get wrapped into all these political games, and it is like a space opera story set in our solar system, and there is like an alien living thing that is kind of like a virus almost, and they're trying to like cope with that, plus all of the political struggles involved with that, because humans have inhabited most of the solar system. And the first book I didn't love again, but man, this third one was so good. I'm liking where a lot of it is going, and I really just am fully sold on this series at this point. I really thought this series was going to be mid for me, and that I might even end up DNFing it at some point if it didn't grow, because there is like, I think there's 9 books, 10 books, there's a lot of novellas in there. So I was like, this series may not be for me, but I'm going to keep trying. And I'm glad I did, because Avadons Gate was really good. Next up, I read Dragon Keeper by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Rainwild Chronicles, which is the fourth series in the Realm of the Elderlings. And if you've watched pretty much any video on my channel, you know how much I love Robin Hobb. So this series I've kind of gone into with an open mind, because this one is the one that people either love or they just are kind of like, it's just not as good. So many people say it's just not as good as the rest. And I definitely saw that with this one, but at the end of the day, it's still a Robin Hobb book. I don't want to get into what it's about because I will spoil things for previous books, but we're back in the Rainwilds, basically, hence Rainwild Chronicles. I don't think it's as bad as some people were saying, but I can definitely see that it's not on par with the first 3 series. But it's still really good, and it's still Robin Hobb characters, and her characters are just so compelling and so interesting. So I am not like disappointed in reading these. I think I gave this one like 3.5 stars, but I'll talk about later. I read the second one, and I think it was better than the first, and I think they're still good. So overall, this was not a disappointment. I think it was a good book, but definitely not on par with the first 3 series. Next up, I read The Atlas Paradox by Olivia Blake. This is the second book in the Atlas series, the first one being the Atlas 6. Also, I burned myself at work, and I have this cute Squirtle band-aid. I have no idea if you're going to be able to see this. That will be featured in this video. I have seen a lot of mixed reviews on this sequel. I think that the Atlas 6 got so much hype on Book Talk, and so many people talked about the Atlas 6 that people went into it with really high expectations, and maybe it didn't meet those expectations. But I loved the Atlas 6. I thought it was so much fun, and I love the characters. They are all so morally gray. You really can't root for any of them, but you love them all so much. So I went into the Atlas Paradox nervous because a lot of people I'd seen that did love the Atlas 6 didn't like the Atlas Paradox as much. But I still really loved it. Some of the things that these students think about and talk about and what they want to do with their magic is all so interesting and basically breaking science, and I love it. It's all kind of science-based, kind of magic-based, and while maybe the magic system isn't fully explained to you, I don't think that's a problem. I like the mystery of it. I like that these people just kind of seem all-powerful, and they even touch on that in this book, and I just really love these characters. They're all so bad. They're all such bad people, and their power has gone to their head, but they're so fun to follow. And yeah, I'm fully on board with this series. I get why some people don't like it, but I really do think this series is a lot of fun, and I have a blast reading them. And I read them all so quick because they're such fun reads. They're just really fun, and I just have a blast reading them. So this was great. Next up, I read Mistborn Secret History, which is a novella set in the Mistborn world, which is kind of it takes place at the same time as the second and third book of Mistborn Era 1. It's something that's happening elsewhere, and I really, really thought it was good. The main character of it, who I won't spoil, I don't like as much. I think he can be kind of annoying, but I still thought that the plot was really great. The biggest drawback for me is Brandon Sanderson trying to be funny. He's just not funny. And the main character kept making all these jokes that were just dumb and pulled me out of the story. So I think Brandon Sanderson is good at writing funny character interactions, but when a character tries to tell a joke, it's just unfunny. So other than that, though, I think that this added a lot of lore to the Cosmere, and it really helped with a book I also read this month. It really helped put a lot of stuff into context for me, and it also helped with a lot of Mistborn Year 2, helped with even some stuff in Stormlight. So I really, really enjoyed Mistborn Secret History. And then speaking of Mistborn, I also read The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson. This is the final book in the Mistborn Era 2, and it just came out this month. See my Barnes & Noble sticker. We love a Barnes & Noble sticker, but I got it for more than $5 off because I went and got it on the Barnes & Noble half off sale. So here we are. Anyway, I absolutely ate this book up. Mistborn Era 2 is kind of it's always debated which one's better, Era 1 or Era 2, and they're very different vibes. But I've always loved Era 2. I don't know if I love it more. I think that technically Mistborn Era 1 is better, but Mistborn Era 2 is just a lot of fun. It feels a little more lighthearted while still having high stakes. The Lost Metal, had so many Cosmere tie-ins that were so great. I'm gonna actually shout out Bookborn Reviews. I'll link her video down below. She does a video where she talks about every Cosmere tie-in in The Lost Metal, and it was so helpful. As soon as I finished this book, I went and watched that because it was so informative for anything I missed, which I caught most of them, surprisingly. I'm normally not good at catching stuff like that, but I caught most of the Cosmere tie-ins, but there were a few I missed. So it was really awesome that she did that video. So I'll link that down below. But anyway, this book had so many fun Cosmere tie-ins that it really answered a lot of questions. I feel like a lot of times authors that have expansive worlds don't really hand you anything. It is up to the reader to try to find those little Easter eggs and find the little clues, which is fun. But at some point, the story needs to come together, and you can really start to see that in this book. A lot of questions were answered, a lot of there's a character in here that you've seen throughout a lot of Cosmere books. It was always is that him? Is that him? And he was actually named in this book. So that was really cool. But overall, I just really liked this book. I loved this era. I like the characters a lot. I think the ending had a good emotional impact, and I think that it was a warranted, good, resolved ending. I think that enough ends were tied to be satisfying while still leaving a lot open for Cosmere stuff, because this is going to tie into a lot of stuff. There's going to be a Mistborn Era 3, I believe, plus there's more Stormlight books coming. There's all these secret novels next year. So overall, a lot happening, and I'm very excited. Next up, I read The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. This is a Russian-inspired fantasy story that's set in like a very cold Russia, and it's kind of like the story of a Christian priest, or what, I don't know exactly what his title was, I don't remember, but a Christian priest comes to this small town and is trying to basically proselytize this town to and convince them to get rid of their old gods and accept Christianity into their lives. And by driving out these old gods, a lot of bad things start happening. And there's this one girl who can see these gods and other creatures, and she knows what's going on, and she's trying to convince the people to stop doing what they're doing. And overall, it was a really entertaining book. I'm going to finish the trilogy. I wouldn't say it's a new favorite yet. I mean, there's still 2 more books to go, but I did really enjoy it. I really like folklore stories. I like those kind of like fairy tale, folk tale storytelling devices, and I did really enjoy this book. So I'm excited to continue the series. Definitely not a new favorite, but it was very enjoyable, and the audiobook was really good. Next up, I reread Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is the first book in a adult fantasy series by Leigh Bardugo. This came out like 3 years ago or something, 3 or 4 years ago, I don't remember. And I hadn't read it since it came out. I read it right when it came out. The second one is coming out in January. I am so pumped for Hellbent, which comes out in January, like I said. So I wanted to reread this because I didn't remember a lot of it since I read it so long ago. And it did not disappoint. I actually liked it better this time. I think the first time I read it, I gave it 4 stars. I gave it 5 this time. I don't know if it was because I listened to the audiobook this time or if I'm just more mature as a reader now. So much of this book was just so cool. It is so unique, based off of like any other fantasy I've been reading. It's kind of dark academia. It's about like the secret societies of Yale and the magic powers they have. And this girl, Alex Stern, comes. She gets brought in because she can see ghosts. And these secret societies work with these ghosts, but they cannot all see them. They have to like drink a potion to see them. So they bring in Alex Stern, and she kind of is uncovering this dark, really rough history of these secret societies. And it is so good. And the ending left off on such a wild spot. And I'm so excited to read Hellbent next month. Next up, I read The Wall of Storms by Ken Liu. As you can see, I did some tabbing because Ken Liu's prose is great. But anyway, this is the second book in the Dandelion Dynasty, and I really liked this book a lot more than I liked Grace of Kings. I didn't think Grace of Kings was bad. I just found it not very, like, it never drew me in. I just enjoyed the story, but I was never, like, really invested in the characters. And this one, I really feel like I got to know the characters a little better, and I really enjoyed this book. Ken Liu's prose is phenomenal. He's got so many one-liners in here that are just so impactful, hence why I started tabbing. And I think that this story is really expansive and really entertaining. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of different engineering things. There's really interesting war tactics, and there's inner character battles and stuff that are just, they're really cool. And the battle scenes that we have are really entertaining, and it's just a really great book. I'm really excited to read Veiled Throne. Gonna try to get to that next month. We'll see. These books are huge. But I did really enjoy this book. Next up, I read volumes 65 through 68 of Naruto. I have talked about this a bit in the past. I thought I was going to DNF Naruto, honestly. But I decided to, I think I was like sitting in an airport or something, and I decided, let me just check it out from my library and try to read another one because it's easy reading. And I think I just hit a slump of ones that just weren't working for me because the first one I picked back up, 65, or 64, whatever it was, I was fully invested. I'm back in it. So I read 4 back to back because I was just like, okay, they're getting good now. So I'm really hoping to finish Naruto in the next month or two, because there's only 72 volumes. So I'm like, I've got like 4 volumes left. So I'm very, very invested in the end of this story, and I'm hoping once I finish this full series of Naruto, I want to do a video with my husband because he is a huge Naruto fan, has seen all 500 plus episodes of the show, seen every movie or whatever's come out, and he loves Naruto, but he's never read any of them. He's just watched it. So I want to do a video that is kind of like manga versus anime and kind of talk about the differences and everything. And he is the Naruto expert. I may have read them all, but he definitely knows the story much better than I do. So I'm going to probably defer to him to a lot of it, but I'm excited. I think it'll be a fun video. I'm back on the Naruto train. You'll probably see me talking about how I feel by the end of it. And I might do a dedicated video for the whole series. But anyway, loving Naruto again. So next up, I read Dragon Haven by Robin Hobb, which is the second book in the Rainbow Chronicles. This one was better than the first. I think that her characters are just good. Like, Robin Hobb can't write a bad character, and while I may not feel as invested in these characters as I was in the first 3 series, I still am like, I want to know what happens to them. And also there's more dragons in this series, and I love dragons, as we all know. So this one was also really good. I can't talk about it too much because I don't want to spoil anything, but overall I really enjoyed this book. Robin Hobb literally can't write a bad character, and even though not a whole lot happens in this book, like a lot of it is just travel, I never was bored. There was not a single point where I felt bored. Again, I'm listening to this whole series on audiobook, and I listen to audiobooks pretty quick, and I also listen for hours at a time at work. So I think a lot of times I have less pacing issues with audiobooks than I do when I'm reading physically, because when if I can get through 10 hours of audiobook in a day, it's the pacing issue is such a short blip of my life that I just don't notice as much, because I know some people have pacing issues with these books. But since I'm listening to them, I'm really not noticing that. So I'm really enjoying this series. I'm reading City of Dragons right now, actually, and yeah, I think they're really good. Next up, I read Sling Dragon by Ben Riggs. This is a nonfiction history of Dungeons and Dragons. It was definitely not what I was expecting. It does focus a lot more on like the business side and like the companies that owned Dungeons and Dragons, and less so on the creation of Dungeons and Dragons. It touches on that a little bit, and like Gary Gygax creating Dungeons and Dragons, but it was mostly like his business side of it and how he got Dungeons and Dragons popular. So it was still really interesting. It was a lot of stuff I didn't know. It was just not really what I was expecting. But I did learn a lot about the TTRPG world as a whole. I don't know a whole lot about the business side of it and like the history of it, and so that was a really cool thing to learn, and the audiobook was pretty good, so I liked this. Next up, I read The Churn, which is a novella set in the Expanse universe, and I really liked this novella. It was pretty short, but it focused on one of the main characters' backstories, which has been hinted at a lot, but this really fully fleshed it out, and it was really jarring in a really good way, and I really enjoyed it a lot. So it helped flavor a lot of what happened in the 4th book, so I really liked this. Next up, I did it, guys. I did it! I read The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. I've talked about how I haven't read this series before. I actually DNF'd this book a few years ago, and so I finally came back to it, and I loved it. It was so fun. I think that I just read it at the right time now. I think I tried to read it at a time when there was no way I would enjoy it at that time in my life. So I'm glad I finally committed, because I really liked this. And I'm actually, like, it took a lot for me to not just go pick up The Two Towers right away. I think that this book, while a lot of it definitely felt like a setup book. Like, there was a lot of travel, and it was setting up a lot of the lore and a lot of the conflict to come. There was less conflict in this, I feel like. It was more like just running from the bad guys and traveling. But it was great for a setup book. I still really felt like I learned a lot about the characters. I learned a lot about the lore of the world and the different creatures and races and things like that. So I did really enjoy this book still. So I'm excited to read the next one. Next up, I read the first book in the Legend of Drizzt. This is a D&D novel. D&D has put out hundreds of novels at this point. I think there's like 40 or something just in the Legend of Drizzt. And this is by R.A. Salvatore, who is one of many, but one of the most well-known D&D authors. And this is a omnibus of the first 3 books. So I just read the first book, Homeland, and I went in with really low expectations. I think I just always assumed that the D&D novels were just going to be more like fan fiction for D&D. And that was far from the case. I really, really enjoyed Homeland. It really took me by surprise. I thought it was a really cool atmospheric world, but writing, the prose was really great. Drizzt as a character was really fun. I do think that a lot of the other characters besides Drizzt were very two-dimensional. They all had like very similar goals. There was one other character that was interesting, but the characters were definitely not the strong suit, and I'm wondering if that was because it was supposed to kind of contrast with Drizzt's character, but overall, I still really loved the setting. The plot was interesting. I'm super excited to read the next one. Like, I really want to read it soon, which really surprised me. I thought that these were just going to be like okay books, but I really, really enjoyed Homeland. Next up, I read The Paper Menagerie and Other Stories by Ken Liu. This is obviously a short story collection that I see everyone talking about. So I recently did a road trip with my dad and my stepmom to go visit my grandma. So it was like a 6-hour road trip. And my dad wanted to listen to some short stories. And my dad does not read any fantasy sci-fi. My dad mostly reads like leadership books, like nonfiction leadership books, because he's like a boss of people. But I was like, come on, Dad, give this a shot. And I think he enjoyed some of the stories. We didn't listen to the whole thing together. I ended up finishing it later. But I think we listened to like the first 3 or 4 stories together. And I really couldn't tell if he was enjoying it, but I enjoyed it a lot. And by the end, I was just like in awe of how good these short stories were. They were honestly stunning. And I am so excited to come back and read them physically. So I can kind of digest them a little slower and kind of take them in, read one at a time, really think about them more. But wow, they were honestly stunning and so impactful and so deep, and I learned a lot too. There was like some that were kind of historical, so I learned a lot from them. I really, really enjoyed the short story collection. I'm not big on short stories. I don't read a lot of short stories, but this has convinced me that I should try more short story collections, because I think up until this point, the only short stories I've really ever read are probably Stephen King's short story collections. And I own a copy of one of Robin Hobb's short story collections that I should read soon. And then I also own another Ken Liu short story collection. So I want to try to get more into these short story collections, because it's amazing what an author can pack into such a small amount of writing. So really great. If you haven't read this, I highly recommend. Even if you haven't read any Ken Liu, you don't need to. This collection is great. Last but not least, I read Cibola Burn. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly, by James S.A. Corey. That is the 4th book in The Expanse. I just finished this yesterday, and this is the one that I was like, all right, this is the first 5-star book of the series. I really, really enjoyed this book, and I'm so invested in this series. I talked enough about it earlier, so I won't talk about it much here, but I really, really loved this book. It was really entertaining. I finished it in 2 days. I was listening to it at work, and I just like plowed through it because it was so, so good. I'm fully invested in these characters. I'm fully invested in this plot. The audiobook narrator is phenomenal. I'm excited to continue The Expanse. I'm really loving them. So with that is all of the books I read in December. It was a really successful month. This video is long because I read a ton of books, and I'm very proud of that. So they were also great quality. So love that. So overall, incredible reading month. I am so excited for what 2023 is going to bring. I have a lot of good plans, a lot of big plans. So stay tuned for that. What a good last month of the year. Thank you guys for watching. If you could please let me know down below what were some of the best books you read in December. I would love to hear it. If you could please like, comment, and subscribe, help me spread the word, grow the channel. That would be amazing. If you really like my content, please hit the notification bell to be notified every time I post a new video. As always, your support means the world to me, and until next time, thank you guys.